So it's been a while since I did a top 5 lens video. In fact, I looked it up and it was 6 years ago that I published my latest one. And since then, a lot has changed in APS-C lens land. In fact, out of that original 5 list, only one lens remains in my new current top 5 list, which should tell you a little bit about how things have changed. If there is a single one and done lens for Sony APS-C, I think it's the Sigma 18-50 f2.8. Now, before I talk about this lens, I want to mention a few things. First, this is the only zoom lens on my list. In general, I do think that primes are better optically, they're smaller in size and offer greater light gathering potential. Plus, it forces you to be more creative. However, if you aren't out there trying to be creative or work on your skills and you simply want to get the job done, an f2.8 zoom is the way to go. When it comes to a kit lens replacement for APS-C, there are 3 strong options: the Sigma 18-50, the Tamron 17-70, and the Sony 16-55. I get asked every week about which of these 3 lenses to get, and I did a pretty in-depth comparison between the 3 over 2 years ago. In a nutshell, you can't go wrong with these lenses. Each one has a standout feature. The Tamron has the greatest range and has vibration compensation, so for cameras without in-body stabilization, that is huge. The Sony is the most refined feeling, the widest at 16mm, and optically the most perfect. But even though I currently own both the Sony and the Sigma, I find myself reaching for the Sigma more often, and there are 2 primary reasons for that. Number 1 is size. The second big reason is a big one. Between the Sony and the Sigma, you have a much closer minimum focus distance with the Sigma. So when I'm trying to get some detailed B-roll shots of some tech gizmo or a new lens release, about 98% of the time I am using this Sigma 18-50 for that shot. Now optically, yeah, it has a little bit more chromatic aberration than the Sony, but in terms of overall sharpness and colors, even in the corners, there's not much of a difference between the 3 of these lenses. The Sigma becomes the clear suggestion once you factor in price, which is half of the Sony's and a few hundred less than the Tamron. You are getting a smaller, lighter, just as sharp, made in Japan f2.8 zoom lens for a remarkable price. And if you are just starting out and you don't want to think about buying multiple lenses, this is a great option and you will be happy no matter which camera that you put it on. But let's say you want to go out and take some epic portraits. Well, number 2 on my list is my favorite portrait lens, which happens to be this, a surprise really, the Viltrox 75mm f1.2. Now I got this lens for review and I was simply blown away by its performance. Up until this point, the Sigma 56mm f1.4 was my go-to portrait lens, and certainly if size is important, the Sigma is still the better choice. But the Viltrox is just that little bit more. It's 75mm, which would be equivalent to a 112 on full frame, and what that means is that you get background compression and subject separation and bokeh like you can't believe. The portraits have that little bit of edge and punchiness, the colors pop, the backgrounds are just Cool Whip smooth, and although this is what most people will use this lens for, it isn't some half-baked compromise of a lens. It's built like a tank, all metal and glass construction. It has all of the controls that you will ever need on the lens itself. Autofocus is fast, accurate, silent. Optical flaws are nearly non-existent. It's razor sharp center to corner to the edges across the frame. For a company based out of China that's only been making lenses for a few years, this lens just doesn't make sense. It surprised me big time, and I think for me, this lens solidified Viltrox as a true competitor in the APS-C lens space. Now, I still love my Sigma 56mm, but if I had to pick between the 2, I would pick the Viltrox because it has that extra bit of punch. There's something really cool about this lens. It's an incredible release from a company. But let's move on to lens number 3, which is the only Sony lens in this top 5 list, and that is the Sony 11mm f1.8 prime. Now there are a lot of ultra-wide angle lenses for Sony APS-C, a lot of zooms, a lot of primes, but this one is quite simply just my favorite lens that they've made in years. And f1.8 ultra-wide prime was something that I was asking for in my old videos for years. I never thought that Sony would be the one to make it though, and it's brilliant. Super wide, super compact, super light, optically brilliant, sharp, great colors, no distortion into the edges, just straight lines. I've used this lens to shoot real estate, I've shot vlogs with it, because nowadays if you are cropping in for electronic stabilization, it's not too terribly wide. I've shot landscapes, it's a very unique lens. That perspective is just so vast. It can be too wide at times, but when you pull it off, it just simply works. And this lens is one of the few ultra-wides that is also brilliant at night because f1.8 means it has plenty of light gathering capability, so it's a superb option for astrophotography as well. And I do wish I was a better astrophotographer, but lately I've discovered a new, more important goal, and that is to ditch Premiere Pro and start editing in DaVinci Resolve, which brings me to the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creative people with thousands of classes led by experts in film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and beyond. I've taken dozens of Skillshare classes in the past, so when I wanted to immerse myself in DaVinci Resolve, I started taking a class by Marcel Patillo called DaVinci Resolve, Understand the Power of Every Page. I see Skillshare as a place for me to learn from professionals in an organized, structured manner with no ad breaks or Hoovie's Garage episodes to distract me. So this summer, invest in yourself by starting a learning journey on Skillshare. You can take your side hustle, your skills, your business to the next level. And the first 500 of you who use the link down in the description below will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. So definitely check it out. You have nothing to lose and a whole bunch of great stuff to learn from experts. So that is awesome. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to my top 5 list. All right, number 4 on my list is Old Faithful. This is the Sigma 16mm f1.4, and this is the only lens from that original list that I made 6 years ago that still has a place in my top 5 collection, which says a lot because this lens is now 7 years old. And a lot can change in 7 years. If I were to estimate, this is probably the top 1 or 2 best-selling APS-C lenses of all time. And I'd like to say that maybe I had something to do with that because of how highly I've spoken of this lens, but maybe I moved that needle by 1%. Regardless, even in 2024, this is a workhorse of a lens. It gives you that 24mm field of view on a full frame. It gives you smooth bokeh, subject separation, sharpness across the frame, good autofocus performance, and minimal distortion. It's a little big for a wide prime lens, but construction is solid. It's made in Japan, and I've used this lens hundreds of times, and you can see that it is still in great shape. It still functions and looks just like it did brand new. I still think that as a prime lens on APS-C, 16mm is the most versatile. You can use it for interior work, wide portraits, landscapes, vlogging, travel, gimbal work, the list goes on. Sony saw the success of this lens and released their own a few years ago, the Sony 15mm f1.4, and I personally think of that Sony as a more refined Sigma 16mm. If it comes down to it, yes, the Sony is superior optically, but the problem was and still is the price. The Sony at twice the price just doesn't make any sense when you can pick up this Sigma for $370 US right now on Amazon, and it offers 97% of the performance and leaves enough money in your wallet to pick up a second lens. Now, number 5 was a tough one. What I really wanted was a telephoto lens to kind of round out all of these. But as you guys probably know if you follow this channel, I don't think that we have an adequate APS-C telephoto lens because we need one that covers that kind of 50 to 150mm focal range. And wouldn't you know, Laowa comes out and sends me this 50 to 130 T2.9 kind of cine zoom lens, and I can confirm this is definitely the focal range that we need for a telephoto APS-C lens, but this is not number 5 on my list. In fact, number 5 on my list is a lens that takes what you can argue to be a somewhat boring focal length and just spices it up. And that is, believe it or not, another Viltrox lens, this time the 27mm f1.2. And yeah, I'm probably as surprised as you might be. Maybe I shouldn't say that this is a boring focal length because it is kind of like the focal length everyone grew up shooting, 35mm. But this lens ends up being equivalent to a 40mm full frame lens, which straddles that line of being a 35mm street photography lens and a 50mm portrait lens. I think this is the best street photography lens that we've seen in years. It's far too big and too heavy, but if you are okay with that, you are rewarded with sublime optics, sharpness everywhere, colors that pop, rendering that is is just special. I reviewed this lens recently and I shot wide open at f1.2 expecting it to be soft and neutral, and it was not that at all. And as of the last few years, I've stopped shooting wide open because it's just unnecessary a lot of the time. But with this lens, it makes you want to, because you are rewarded with smooth bokeh even at 27mm, excellent subject separation, and still plenty of depth of field to properly pull off a portrait. I just wish it was smaller and lighter. That being said, if you put this lens on an older camera body, a6000, a6100, it really does liven things up and shows you just how much we've grown in terms of lens development over the years. There you have it. So we have one Sony, two Sigmas, and two Viltroxes in my top 5 lens list. And if you were to tell me a couple of years ago that a single Viltrox would be on my top 5 lens list, I would have probably laughed in your face, but here we are. I'm going to call it for what it is, and these lenses, these releases from Viltrox truly are incredible and they are special. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. If you guys are interested in checking out prices and getting the best deals on buying one of these lenses or a couple of them, as usual, I will have a link down to each and every one down in the description. Also down there, take advantage of that Skillshare 1-month free trial. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.